Hey guys, so in the previous lesson we were introduced to generators and we specifically looked at how to use the right hand rule. Now we're going to go a little bit deeper into the two different types of generators, which is an AC and a DC generator. We're going to look at the structure of each one and the graphs that each one produce. Okay, so let's begin. So here are two generators, okay? What we can see is we've got magnets and we've got an armature with, sometimes they call it a coil, but it's an armature with wire wrapped around like I showed you in the previous lesson. Here we've got it in this one, and here's the magnets. These are actually pictures directly from past exam papers for grade 12. So in the previous lesson, I only showed you up until this part. I just showed you that part and like that part over there. But I never spoke about anything on the outside. Now, by looking at the outside, you can tell whether it's an AC generator or a DC generator. If you have two rings like that, that is AC, okay? AC stands for alternating current, and those two little rings are called slip rings. Okay, now if you have a single ring instead with a little gap in between, can you see it's got a little gap over there and over there? That gap is called a split. So this is called a split ring, and then you say commutator. What a mouthful. Split ring commutator. And that is for a DC generator, which means direct current. What does direct and alternate mean? Direct means current only flows in one direction, and then alternate means current flows forwards and backwards. Okay, so right, so now let's just make sure that you understand that. So if you had to look at this one, would this be AC or DC? Well, you see it's got the little split over there and there's only one of them, so that's DC. Well done if you got that. And then this one over here has two rings, so that would be AC. Nice. And then this one over here has a little split, so you see that? So that's DC. And then this one over here, you can see that there's two rings, so that would be AC. Make sure you understand that, because that's literally how they ask it in the exams. This section doesn't have any calculations really. It's mostly just about naming components, figuring out the direction using the right hand rule, and yeah, knowing if it's AC or DC and things like that. Okay, now we're going to just look at the components of a generator. So we've already learned that these would be your magnets. Okay, magnets. Then the device that puts the wire, that you put the wire on, this rectangular piece over here, that is called your armature. Armature. Then we haven't spoken about these yet. These two things over here, they are called carbon brushes. Okay, and then of course these would be, because there's two of them over here, these would be slip rings. Slip rings for AC, right? This is for AC. Now, sometimes they'll like to ask you, what is the purpose of the carbon brushes? Well, all it is we make electricity inside the generator over here, okay? But that electricity needs to be taken out of the generator and taken to the outside world, to our houses, for example. So to go from the inside part to the outside part, you need a link. And that is what the carbon brush is for. A carbon brush it links the internal circuit to the external circuit. All right, and now we are already at the part where we're going to talk about graphs. Okay, so I'm going to start with AC. AC. So what you have is you're going to have a y-axis and an x-axis. Now your x-axis is usually going to be time measured in seconds. Now your y, sorry, did I say x or y? Sorry, this is your x-axis. Your y-axis is going to be four different things. It could be voltage or EMF. Those are actually the same. They could ask you for change in magnetic flux, or they could ask you for, what's the other one? Current. Luckily, the shape of all of these is going to be the same. Okay, now there's two main types that they could there's two main ways we could draw this. Here's the first one, and I'll show you what the second one looks like. Sometimes the graph starts over here, and then it goes up and down, so it makes a sin graph, or sometimes it can make a cos graph, like this, okay? Now, to be able to show one cycle, I want you to remember the special number 5. 5 shows you one cycle. So what do I mean by that? Well, this is position 1, this is position 2, this is position 3, this is position 4, and this is position 5. That is one cycle. If you only went up to here, that's only half of a cycle. You know when the armature is busy rotating, if you want to show one complete rotation where it goes all the way around 360 degrees, then you have to go all the way up to here. If you only go up to here, then you're only going halfway, okay? And then here as well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is a complete cycle. Now, we need to know when the graph looks like this or when the graph looks like this. And what I want you to quickly do is all of these pieces that are at the top and at the bottom like that, we're going to call those the peaks. The peaks. This is just my own fancy word for it. It's not something they're going to ask you. Peaks. You know, like a mountain top or a mountain peak. Okay. And over here as well, peaks, peaks, peaks. And then these parts here, these are going to be called your zeros, or your zero positions. Okay, so there and there. Those are your zero positions. And I'll explain in a few moments how to know which kind of graph we need to draw. Okay, now, if we look at DC, remember DC means direct, which means that the current only flows in one direction. So the way that this one looks is, once again, you could get two different types. Either it starts at the peak or it starts at the zero. If it starts at the zero, then it goes up just like the previous one did. But now, it's not allowed to go underneath now because it must be in one direction. So it just does this. That's what it could look like. If it starts, and look at that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it starts at a peak, then it would go like this, like that, and like that. Look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Now, I forgot to mention, sometimes your teacher might, instead of going up first, they might go down first, like that, or they might go like that, for example. Okay. You don't really need to know that part, so don't worry too much about that. Or with the direct current, they might go like that, or in this one, they might go like that. Okay, but once again, you don't really need to worry about that too much. So, okay, so then once again, these parts at the top, they are called the peak. So the top, the top, the top, that's the peak. And then these parts at the bottom, they are called your zeros. So just remember that. Okay, so how do we know whether to draw the graph starting at a peak or starting at a zero? It's actually all based upon the diagram that they give you in the exam. Okay, so the way that it works is I want you to draw your magnets. Okay, so you've got your north over here and you've got your south over here. Now, magnetic fields always go from north to south. So connect the north to south like that. Then depending on what they tell you in the exam, they're going to tell you where this device starts. So I'm just going to show this device by using the front part over here. So that device could either start like that, where it's laying down. We call this I call this the parallel. Okay, so then it's parallel. Now parallel, when it starts parallel, that is a peak. That's a peak. But then other times, it might start perpendicular. So at other times, it might be like this. And that is called perpendicular, 90 degrees. You see what I mean? There's like a little 90 there. So perpendicular. If it's like that, then that is a zero position. Okay, so let's go. So just make sure you've got all of that. Now let's go put this into practice. So you can see what this crazy guy trying to explain this to you is trying to say. So draw one complete cycle of voltage. Now remember, they could ask you to do voltage, change in magnetic flux, EMF, or current. Luckily, the shape of all of those will be the same. So it says draw one complete cycle of voltage versus time for this generator. Assume that the armature begins perpendicular. So we're going to be starting like that. But we also need to know whether we are busy with a DC graph or AC graph. How do we do that? Remember, guys, I told you, all you do is you look at this over here. You see if there's a little gap over there? That means there's a split. So this is a split ring commutator, and that means this is DC. You need to know that, okay? You just need to memorize that for yourself. Okay, so we're going to go draw a graph of voltage versus time, and we are starting perpendicular. So perpendicular means we're going to start at a 0. So we're going to start at a 0, and then we're just going to do one cycle, which means you need 5 points, and it's for a DC. So remember, DC is just going to go like this, like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. That's literally how we would do it. Now, just to tell you what else we're still going to be doing in this lesson, we're still going to be doing a few more examples of these, but then we're also going to get to some interesting things like this question where we start being given frequency and we need to convert that into time. And then we're also going to use the Faraday's equation to do questions like this, where they double the rotation speed or they half the rotation speed, and then you have to explain how the graph will change. We're going to do 2 of those. Okay, so stick around. We still got some more like new things that we're going to go through. It's not just going to be this. So yeah, all very important stuff. Here's our next example. So it says draw a complete cycle of change in magnetic flux. Okay, so that's change in magnetic flux versus time for this generator. Assume that the armature begins parallel. Okay, so we know that we're going to put a y-axis and an x-axis. Your x-axis will be time measured in seconds. Your y-axis in this scenario is going to be change in magnetic flux. First things to look out for is what type of generator do we have? Is it an AC or a DC? Well, because we've got the slip rings over there, we know that this is AC. Okay, so our graph is either going to go like that or like that. Okay, depending if we're starting at a peak or a 0. So they said assume that the armature begins parallel to the magnetic field. Okay, so that looks like that, parallel. So that means we're going to start at a peak. So you start at a peak and then you do 5 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you notice that I went below because it's an AC. If it was a DC, like I think the previous one was a DC. Yeah, when we did this DC one in the previous example, they said it starts perpendicular. Okay, so that's where we went like that, but then I didn't go below because DC doesn't do that. So you see, you need to know the difference between DC and AC. Let's do another example. Here's the good example that I was talking about where they start speaking about frequency. The following generator has a frequency of 10 Hertz. Draw a graph showing one cycle of EMF of this graph. Assume the armature begins parallel. Okay, so in grade 10, so when we were busy doing waves and things like that, there would have been some formulas where we learned about frequency is 1 over period, and period is 1 over frequency. Now, frequency means waves. Or let's rather say frequency is number of waves per second, whereas period is number of seconds per one wave. So when you draw a graph of a wave or of a complete cycle, to show that complete cycle, you need to know how long does it take to make one wave. So we need to know the number of seconds for one wave. So we need the period. Now, period is equal to 1 over frequency. So we could say t is equal to 1 over f. Well, we just wrote that, Kev. T is equal to 1 over 10, and that's going to give us 0,1 seconds. That means it'll take 0.1 seconds to make one wave. So we can go draw our graph now. And our y-axis is going to be EMF, okay, EMF, and our x-axis is time, measured in seconds. Okay, now I'll show you where we'll use that now. So we need to see, are we AC or DC? Well, if you look here, it's got a split. So this is a split ring, so that means DC. The next thing, are we starting at a peak or are we starting at a zero? It says, assume that the armature begins parallel. Okay, so when it begins parallel, that means we're starting at a peak. So let's go draw a DC peak, or a DC graph. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See how I didn't go underneath here because it's not AC. Now we can show the time at this ending part as 0,1 seconds. Make sense? So that's how we could, that's all that they would want you to show on the graph. The next thing we're going to do is really important. You know this equation now. I know they're not writing it very nicely. I just grabbed it off the internet, but that's how we usually see this formula. Okay, I guess I could have used our formula sheet and just gotten it from there. Come on, Kevin, wake up, dude. Think about it. So this formula is really important. It can help us to understand a lot about how to make more electricity. So what they typically like to do is they will say they'll try to change this part over here, and they want to know how it will affect the EMF and how it will affect the shape of the graph that we draw. So if I just write this out again, okay. So it says here, what happens if you double the rotation speed? Okay, now if they rotate that device at double the speed, then you would produce double the amount of electricity, or the electricity would have a much higher voltage. It would have double the voltage. But let me try explain that to you from this formula. So you need to understand the following, because what a lot of learners, when we say something goes faster, some learners think, oh, so the time is going to increase, because they think faster means increase. That's true for many things, but not when it comes to time. With time, if you become faster, your time becomes less. For example, if Usain Bolt, remember the sprinter Usain Bolt, when he runs 100 meters, he can do it in like 9.4 seconds. Okay? But now, I don't know if you know this, but I'm actually faster than that. I can actually run the 100 meters in 7.2 seconds. I just decided I don't feel like really going to the Olympics, but I actually can do it. I promise I can. Okay, obviously I'm joking, guys. But if I can run it at 7.2 seconds, then I would be running faster than Usain Bolt. So the lower the time, the faster the person or the thing is going. So if you had to make this value smaller, because it's in the denominator, it would make this value larger. Okay? Think about this. If you say 100 divided by 2, what does that give you? That gives you 50. But now what if I say 100 divided by 1? So then I'm making the denominator smaller. Then that would give me 100. So can you see that? When you divide by a smaller denominator, your answer becomes larger. Okay, so that's important that you understand that. When you so if we half this value, then this value actually doubles. And now we're going to go draw graphs, and we're going to look at two very important things on the graph. So here in this example, it says the following generator has a frequency of 20. Okay, so we shouldn't be afraid of that anymore. And then, oh, by the way, we're just going to do this example, and then we're going to do one more example. So it says, draw a graph showing one cycle of the voltage output of this graph. The armature begins as shown in the diagram. Okay, so for the first one, we need to go work out the time for one cycle. So we can say T is equal to 1 over F, which is equal to 1 over 20, which is 0,05 seconds. Okay, so the first graph will end up over here. So it says that okay, so we're going to draw our y-axis quickly, y-axis and x-axis. x-axis is time, measured in seconds, and then the y-axis would be voltage. Now, because they said voltage. Okay, now what would happen is, where are we? Oh yes, we need to know, is it AC or DC? So this is an AC because it's got slip rings. And they said that the armature begins as shown. So if you draw from north to south, and then you look at the armature is parallel to that. The armature is not standing up like this, so it's parallel. So it's like that. So that means we're going to start at a peak. Okay, so we'll start at a peak. And I'm going to start over here. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so there's the 5 different parts like that. Now, so that's the first question complete. Now it says the rotation speed is now halved. Haha. So now think about it, without even looking at the formula, if you rotate this device slower, are you going to make more electricity or less? Well, you're going to make less. So your voltage values are going to be half of what they normally would have been. So instead of going all the way up to this level and all the way down to this level, that's going to drop. We're only going to go half of that. So we're going to go up to this level and down to that level. So that's going to be our high and our low point on the graph. That's the first thing I want to talk about. The second thing we need to understand is that if we halving the speed, what does that do to time? If you half the speed that you run, that means you're running slower, so the time is actually going to increase. So all of these points, their times are going to double. All of these points, their times are going to double. So the way that we do that, so remember guys, there are two things that we're changing. We're changing the height, so instead of it being up here, it's going to be here, and we're also doubling the time. So let's start with this first point. If you double its time, well, that won't change because its time is currently 0. And if you double 0, that doesn't do anything. And then you also have to half its height. So it would be over here. So that's going to be over there. The next point we're going to look at is this one. Its time, the way I like to look at it is, this is 1 block. So now we're going to make the time 2 blocks. Okay? So it's going to go over there. Sorry, I just lost my x-axis there. So we've done this point and we've done this point. And I didn't change the height over here because that height is currently 0. And if you half 0, it's still going to be 0. The next critical point or main point to look at is this one over here. So we know that its voltage value is going to half. So that means it's going to go there. But we also need to double its time. So if this one is 2 blocks from the y-axis, now it's going to go another 2 blocks. So it's 4 blocks away. So it's going to be there. But because we're halving the value, it's going to go there. Okay, make sure you understand how I'm getting that point. So all I did is I halved the y value, so it goes to there, but then I doubled the time. So it was 2 blocks away, now it's 4 blocks away. Okay, you might have to pause and just, Kev, why'd you do that, bro? You just you're going to have to give that some thought. I was chatting to Bill Gates the other day, because I'm cool, guys. I just have him on my WhatsApp, and I was just giving him a call. Just shortly after I phoned Usain Bolt, telling him that in my garden the other day, I ran a 7.2 on the 100, and asked him if he just needs a bit of advice. Anyway, so I spoke to Bill Gates, and I was like, Bill Gates, my man, I just call him Billy, by the way. I was like, Billy, my bro, it actually sounds so weird. I think Bill Gates is quite a strange character, so yeah. But anyway, why do you guys not invent, because he was like part of Microsoft's original development and bloody blah. I was like, why don't you guys invent a undo button for PowerPoint? Because whenever I'm busy doing my lessons like this and I make a little mistake like I did now where I erased the entire graph, I have to go redraw everything instead of just being able to click undo. So he was like, yeah, I'll make a plan. So yeah, hopefully Microsoft will be releasing something like that quite soon. So yeah, it's a pleasure, guys. If you need me to help you with other things, just let me know and I can just give these people a call. Now, guys, you must know I'm talking absolute nonsense. Imagine. So, where were we? Oh, yes. So we were on... See, I'm getting all distracted now. I apologize. So we did that point. We've already looked at this point. Okay, the next important one is this one. So this one, if we had to double or half its voltage value, it would stay where it is because it's already on the 0 on the x-axis. So all that we'll do is we'll change its time. So you see how it's already 3 blocks away. So if you double that, it's going to be 6 blocks away. So that's going to be over here. Okay, so we've finished that point over there. And then we need to do this point. So all we're going to do is half its y value. Oh, see, now this is what I'm talking about, guys. Okay, there, we did it again. So we half its y value. So instead of it being there, it's now going to go there. Okay, so we just do that. And then we're going to double its time. So look at how many blocks away it is. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. So now it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So that it's a total of 8 blocks away. And that's going to be over there. And now we can go draw our new graph. So it's important that you understand that the voltage values, they all halved, okay? And the times doubled. The voltage is halved, the times doubled. Let's go do our last example for this lesson, and then we are done. Well done for making it this far. So the following generator has a frequency of 20. Okay, so it has a frequency of 20. Draw a graph showing one cycle. The armature begins perpendicular this time. Okay, so we have to go quickly work out the period. So t is equal to 1 over f, which is equal to 1 over 20, which is equal to 0.05 seconds. Okay, now we need a y-axis. Woo, L straight. Okay, voltage, and then time. Now, they tell us in question, I know we're going to do question A first, but in question B, they're going to double the rotation speed. And when you double the rotation speed, your voltages increase. So question B is actually going to have the larger voltages. So I'm going to make question A have the smaller voltages. Otherwise, we're going to run out of space on this graph. Okay, so if you're wondering why I'm doing that, it's because I've already planned this question beforehand. Okay. So the following generator has a frequency. Draw a graph showing one cycle. Okay, so if you look here, it's an AC graph, right? It's AC, that because it's got slip rings. And so, okay. Now the next thing we need to look at is, it says the armature begins perpendicular. So that means we're going to start at a 0. So we're going to start at a 0. And I'm going to try and make the graph end up over here. Because I know that in the new question, they said the rotation speed is doubled, which is going to half the time. Okay, so we're going to go all the way to there, but let's do it nicely. So it's going to go there, there, and there. So that's what the graph would look like for question A. That's question A's graph complete. Now, going into question B, they said the rotation speed is now doubled. So think about it. Without even looking at the formula, if you double the speed at which you rotate this device, you're going to make more, or your voltages are going to be larger. Okay, by the way, this peak over here is meant to be over there. Just didn't draw it perfectly. So the voltages are all going to double. So this voltage is currently 0. Now, if you double 0, it just stays 0. So that point's not going to move. Now, this point over here, it's going to do two things. Its voltage value is going to double. So I'll just put an open circle over there. So it doubled. Can you see that? It was 2 blocks high. Now it's 4 blocks high. Okay? But then its time is going to half, because when you do something faster, your time becomes less. So it was 2 blocks away from the y-axis. Now it's only going to be 1 block away. So it's going to be over here. Okay, so that's where the new point will be, over there. Let's just color this one in a different color. Okay, so we've done this point over here. Ooh, okay, if you can't see yellow on white, my dude, let's rather do it like that. Okay. Now we're going to have a look at this point over here. Now that voltage is 0. So if you double 0, it's not going to change, but you can change the time. So if you look at currently, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks wide. Now we're just going to make it 2 blocks wide. So it's going to go over there. Okay, so we've done this point over here. Now we need to do this one. So remember, two things are going to happen there. The voltage value is going to double. So instead of it being 2 blocks down, it's going to be 4 blocks down. So it's going to be there. But then we also need to look at the time. So it's currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks wide. Now it's just going to be 3. So 1, 2, 3. So it's going to be over there. Okay, so we've completed this point over here. And then this part over here currently has a voltage of 0, so that won't change. But if you look at the time, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 blocks wide. So now we're going to half that, so it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks wide, because the time is becoming half, so it's going to go over there. Now we can just draw a graph, so it's just going to go like that, whoopsie, like that, and like that. So what we've done is we've doubled all of the voltages. So instead of it going up to this level and down to that level, it doubled. So it went all the way up to there and all the way down to there. And then the times halved. So instead of it taking all the way up to here to make one cycle, now it took exactly half the time.